The scent of espresso and fresh basil hung thick in the air of Russo's, mingling with the sharp tang of aged wine and something darker, expensive cologne, leather, and an undercurrent of danger I couldn't quite name. My fingers trembled as I balanced the tray of antipasti, the porcelain plates rattling softly against each other. It was the kind of tremor that came from standing for 12 hours straight, from skipping lunch because rent was due and every dollar mattered, from being invisible in a room full of people who would never notice if I disappeared entirely. I'd been working at Russo's for 6 months, long enough to recognize the regulars, to memorize their orders, to understand the unspoken hierarchy of who sat where. The restaurant occupied a corner of Little Italy that still felt authentically Italian, not the tourist trap version with checkered tablecloths and singing waiters. This place was different, quieter. The kind of establishment where conversations dropped to whispers when certain people entered, where cash exchanged hands under tables, where I'd learned to see nothing, hear nothing, say nothing. Tonight, the air felt heavier than usual. I moved through the dining room like a ghost, refilling water glasses, clearing plates, my worn sneakers silent against the marble floor. My uniform, a simple black dress that had seen better days, hung loose on my frame. I'd lost weight I couldn't afford to lose, but that's what happens when you're choosing between eating and keeping the electricity on. My dark hair was pulled back in a bun so tight it gave me a headache, but at least it looked neat. Professional. Invisible. That's when he walked in. I felt him before I saw him. A shift in the atmosphere, like barometric pressure dropping before a storm. Conversations stuttered, silverware paused mid-air. Even Antonio, our manager who feared nothing, straightened his tie and moved toward the entrance with a deference I'd never seen before. He was tall, over 6 feet, with the kind of presence that didn't require volume or violence to command attention. His suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, probably worth more than I'd make in a year. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that suggested he'd never backed down from anything in his life. And eyes, God, those eyes. Even from across the room, I could see they were the color of espresso, so dark they were almost black, and they swept the restaurant with the practiced awareness of a man who'd survived by noticing everything. 2 men flanked him. Not friends. Security. They moved with military precision, one scanning the room while the other spoke quietly into his wrist. The way they positioned themselves, blocking exits, checking sightlines, told me this wasn't a man who went anywhere without protection. Mr. DeLuca, Antonio breathed, and I recognized the name like a punch to the gut. Dante DeLuca. I'd heard the name whispered in the kitchen, seen it in newspaper articles I shouldn't have been reading. The DeLuca family didn't just own restaurants in Little Italy, they owned everything. Protection, imports, construction, and businesses nobody talked about in polite company. The kind of family that made problems disappear. The kind of man mothers warned their daughters about. He moved toward his usual table. Corner booth, back to the wall, clear view of both entrances, and I realized with sinking dread that it was in my section. My section. Of course it was. I pressed myself against the wall as his entourage passed, and for one breath-stealing moment, his gaze swept over me. Not at me, over me, through me. The way people look at furniture. In that instant, I saw the cruelty that could live in beauty, the violence that could hide behind civility. Then he was past, settling into the booth with the easy confidence of a king on his throne. One of his guards remained standing, positioned where he could watch the door. The other sat adjacent, never fully relaxing. DeLuca himself sat back, one arm draped along the booth's edge, and opened a menu he probably had memorized. Table 12. Antonio hissed at me, appearing at my elbow. Don't mess this up, Sophia. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't make eye contact. Take his order. Bring his food. Be invisible." "I'm always invisible," I murmured. But Antonio had already hurried away. I approached the table on legs that felt like water, my order pad clutched in damp fingers. The guard tracked my movement with cold efficiency. Up close, I could see the slight bulge under his jacket. Gun, of course. "Good evening," I said softly, keeping my eyes on my notepad. "Can I start you with something to drink? Macallan 25, neat." His voice was like smoke and silk, carrying an Italian accent that turned English words into something almost musical. "And water, still, not sparkling. Pellegrino for my associate." I scribbled notes I didn't need, my hand shaking slightly. "And for dinner? The osso buco. Tell Marco to prepare it the way my father liked it. He'll know." I nodded, turning to leave. Desperate to escape the suffocating weight of his presence. That's when I saw her. She'd entered through the side door, the one near the kitchen that regular patrons weren't supposed to use. Beautiful in that calculated way that required effort and money. Honey blonde hair in perfect waves, a red dress that probably cost more than my car, lips painted the color of arterial blood, but it wasn't her beauty that made my blood run cold. It was the 3 men who entered behind her, fanning out with the practiced coordination of a tactical team. They weren't dressed like waiters or guests. They wore dark suits, yes, but their jackets were unbuttoned, hands positioned near their waists. "Ready," and they were positioning themselves around DeLuca's table. I'd seen enough mob movies to recognize a setup when I saw one. My eyes darted to the woman. She was looking directly at DeLuca with an expression that mixed triumph and fury in equal measure. His wife? She had to be. The rock on her finger could fund a small country. Time seemed to slow down. I saw her nod, almost imperceptibly, to one of her men. I saw his hand move toward his jacket. I saw the guard beside DeLuca tense, sensing something wrong but not yet sure what. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to hide in the kitchen, to be anywhere but here. This wasn't my business. These weren't my people. I was nobody. Just a broke waitress trying to survive in a city that chewed up people like me and spit them out. But I thought of DeLuca sitting there, unaware, his back against the wall, but his focus on the menu. I thought of the violence about to explode in a restaurant full of innocent people. I thought of blood on marble floors, of screaming, of police and questions I couldn't answer. My hand moved before my brain caught up. I grabbed a cocktail napkin from my apron, fumbling for the pen clipped to my order pad. My fingers were shaking so badly I could barely write, scrawling 6 words in desperate, jagged letters. "Your wife set a trap. Leave now." I folded the napkin with trembling hands, walked back to his table on legs that barely held me, and placed it directly in front of him next to his water glass. His eyes lifted to mine for the first time, really looked at me, and I felt stripped bare under that gaze. Dark eyes that had seen too much, that could probably read every desperate thought in my head. For one endless moment, he stared at me, and I watched something shift in his expression. Not gratitude, not kindness, something sharper, more dangerous. Recognition that I'd just inserted myself into something I didn't understand. He unfolded the napkin with one hand, his movements slow and deliberate. I watched his jaw tighten as he read the words. His eyes flickered to the woman in red, tracking her position, then to her men, cataloging threats with the speed of someone who'd been doing it all his life. "Go to the kitchen," he said softly, his voice carrying a command that made my feet want to move. "Lock yourself in the freezer. Don't come out until someone you trust comes for you. But now." The guard beside him was already moving, speaking urgently into his wrist. DeLuca stood in one fluid motion, his hand going to his own jacket. The woman in red saw him move, and her expression transformed from triumph to rage. "Dante!" she screamed, and her voice cut through the restaurant's murmur like a knife. Everything exploded into chaos. One of her men reached for his gun. DeLuca's guard was faster, stepping between them, his own weapon appearing as if from nowhere. Diners screamed. Tables overturned. I stumbled backward, my tray clattering to the floor. "Sophia!" Antonio grabbed my arm, trying to pull me toward the kitchen. "Move!" But I couldn't. I was frozen, watching the scene unfold like a nightmare. The woman in red was shouting in rapid Italian, words I didn't understand, but could feel the venom in. DeLuca's voice cut through the noise, cold and controlled, speaking with an authority that made even armed men hesitate. Then his eyes found mine across the chaos, pinning me in place with an intensity that stopped my breath. In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that I'd changed something, that by writing those 6 words, I'd stepped off a cliff, and there was no going back. A gunshot cracked through the air. I screamed, diving behind the bar as glass shattered somewhere above my head. More shouting, running footsteps. Antonio was yelling into his phone, calling 911, and I was pressed against the floor, my hands over my head, trembling so violently I thought I might shake apart. When I finally dared to look up, DeLuca was gone. His guards were gone. The woman in red and her men were retreating toward the side door, and the restaurant was in ruins. Overturned furniture, broken glass, terrified customers cowering under tables. And in the center of it all, placed carefully on the bar where I'd hidden, was a single business card with an embossed gold crest and a phone number written on the back in bold, masculine handwriting. I didn't go home that night. The police kept us for hours, taking statements, asking questions I answered with carefully practiced ignorance. No, I didn't see who fired the shot. No, I didn't know any of the people involved. No, I was just bringing water when everything went crazy. I'd perfected the art of being forgettable, and tonight that skill might have saved my life. By the time they released us, it was past 3 a.m. Antonio pressed $200 into my hand, hush money, though he didn't call it that, and told me to take a few days off. The restaurant would be closed for renovations. We both knew what that meant. I took the subway home because my car had died 2 weeks ago, and I couldn't afford to fix it. The train was nearly empty at this hour, just me and a homeless man sleeping across 3 seats. I clutched my purse against my chest, the business card burning like a coal in my pocket. I hadn't looked at it again, hadn't touched it, as if ignoring it would make tonight disappear. My apartment was a 4th-floor walk-up in a building that should have been condemned. The hallway smelled like mildew and someone's burnt dinner from 3 days ago. I fumbled with my keys, my hands still shaking, and finally got the door open to my small studio. 300 square feet of cracked linoleum, a Murphy bed that didn't fold properly, and a window that overlooked a brick wall. Home. I locked the door, engaged the chain, and shoved a chair under the handle for good measure. Only then did I allow myself to fall apart. I slid down the door to the floor, wrapped my arms around my knees, and tried to breathe through the panic clawing at my throat. What had I done? What the hell had I been thinking? I'd inserted myself into a Mafia confrontation. Me, Sophia Chen, nobody waitress with an eviction notice taped to her door, and $37 in her checking account. The business card felt like it was radiating heat through my jeans pocket. I pulled it out with trembling fingers, finally forcing myself to look at it properly. Heavy cardstock, expensive. The kind of paper that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. The gold crest showed a lion and a crown above 2 crossed swords. Beneath it, in elegant script, DeLuca Enterprises. I flipped it over. The phone number was written in black ink, the handwriting bold and decisive. Below it, 3 words that made my stomach drop. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Call. Not a request. A command. I should have torn it up. Should have flushed it down the toilet and pretended tonight never happened. Instead, I placed it on my small table and stared at it like it might bite me. Sleep was impossible. I lay in my Murphy bed watching the ceiling, jumping at every sound in the hallway, replaying the moment over and over. The way his eyes had locked onto mine. The gunshot. The chaos. The card appearing as if by magic. Your wife set a trap. Was she his wife? Had I just helped him escape a murder attempt? Or had I inserted myself into something darker, more complicated than I could comprehend? When dawn finally came, I was exhausted but wired, my mind racing in circles. I made instant coffee because it was all I could afford, and stood at my window watching the city wake up. Somewhere out there, Dante DeLuca was alive because of me. And somewhere out there, the woman in red was probably very, very angry about it. The card sat on my table, waiting. At 1:30 p.m., I picked up my phone, put it down, picked it up again. My finger hovered over the keypad, heart hammering against my ribs. This was insane. I should ignore it, block the number, move to another state. At 1:45, I dialed. It rang once. A man's voice answered, not DeLuca's, crisp, professional, American. Miss Chen, Mr. DeLuca is expecting you. A car will arrive at your address at 2:15. Please be ready. How did you... But he'd already hung up. I stared at my phone in horror. He knew my name. My address. Of course he did. Men like Dante DeLuca didn't leave loose ends. They tied them up or cut them off. Panic seized me. I should run. Pack a bag and disappear, but where would I go? I had no family, no savings, nowhere to hide from someone with his resources. And something in that crisp voice had made it clear. This wasn't optional. I showered quickly in my tiny bathroom where the hot water only lasted 3 minutes, then stood in front of my closet staring at my pathetic collection of clothes. Everything was either work uniforms or thrift store finds, nothing appropriate for meeting a Mafia boss. Finally, I settled on my only pair of decent jeans and a simple black sweater. I left my hair down, applied minimal makeup, and tried to look like someone who wasn't terrified for her life. At exactly 2:15, my phone buzzed. Outside. I peered through my window and my breath caught. A black Mercedes sedan idled at the curb, its windows tinted so dark they looked like pools of ink, the kind of car that cost more than I'd make in 5 years, the kind that said money and power and don't ask questions. I grabbed my purse, checked 3 times that my door was locked, and descended the stairs on shaking legs. The driver was already standing by the rear door, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a black suit and sunglasses despite the overcast day. He opened the door without a word, and I caught a glimpse of the interior. Black leather, polished wood, a privacy screen between front and back. "Miss Chen," he said, his voice flat and professional. I climbed in because what choice did I have? The door closed with the heavy thunk of expensive engineering, sealing me in cool, leather-scented silence. The seats were buttery soft. Classical music played softly from hidden speakers, and despite the luxury, I felt like I was being driven to my execution. We drove through the city, leaving my neighborhood's cramped streets for wider avenues lined with brownstones and boutiques. The buildings got nicer, the cars more expensive, the people more polished. We crossed into a neighborhood I'd only seen in magazines, where doormen stood at attention and private parks hid behind iron gates. The car pulled up to a building that looked like it belonged in a European capital, all limestone and brass, with an awning stretching to the curb and a doorman who looked like he could bench press me. He opened my door, offering his hand to help me out. "Miss Chen, Mr. DeLuca is expecting you, penthouse level." The lobby was all marble and mirrors, with a chandelier that probably cost more than my entire building. An elevator attendant, an actual person whose job was to press buttons, smiled politely, and pressed P. My reflection in the mirrored walls looked small and out of place. A mouse in a palace. The elevator rose smoothly, my ears popping as we climbed higher and higher. When the doors finally opened, it wasn't into a hallway. It opened directly into an apartment. No, not an apartment. A penthouse that took up the entire floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city. The furniture was sleek and modern. All clean lines and expensive fabrics. Art that looked museum quality hung on the walls. And standing by the windows, silhouetted against the afternoon light, was Dante DeLuca. He'd changed from his suit into dark slacks and a white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle. Without the armor of formal wear, he looked younger, maybe late 30s, but no less dangerous. He turned as I entered, and even from across the room, I felt the weight of his attention. "Miss Chen." He moved toward me with the fluid grace of a predator, and every instinct screamed at me to run. "Thank you for coming." Did I have a choice? The words escaped before I could stop them. His mouth curved, not quite a smile, but something close. No? At least he was honest. He gestured to a sitting area near the windows. "Please, sit." I perched on the edge of a sofa that probably cost more than my yearly rent, my hands clasped in my lap to hide their trembling. He sat across from me, close enough that I could see the faint scar above his left eyebrow, the shadow of stubble along his jaw. Close enough to smell his cologne. Something dark and expensive with notes of cedar and bergamot. "You saved my life last night," he said simply. I saw something wrong. Anyone would have... No. His voice cut through my stammering like a blade. Anyone else would have looked away, would have convinced themselves it wasn't their business. You wrote that note knowing it could get you killed. I swallowed hard. "Is she really your wife, Julia?" His expression darkened. "Yes, or she was. We've been separated for 2 years, but she refuses to sign the divorce papers. Last night was her final attempt to ensure she inherited everything by killing you. By making it look like a robbery gone wrong. She had witnesses ready to testify, probably had police on her payroll." He leaned forward slightly, his elbows on his knees. "Because of you, she failed. Because of you, I'm alive. That creates a debt." Fear spiked through me. I don't want anything. I don't want money or... Everyone wants something, Miss Chen. His eyes held mine, and I felt stripped bare under that gaze. "You work double shifts at a restaurant where you're invisible. You live in an apartment with an eviction notice on the door. Your car is dead. Your bank account is empty, and you survive on coffee and determination. So yes, you want something. The question is whether you're brave enough to accept what I'm offering." Heat flooded my cheeks. He'd investigated me, knew everything about my pathetic life. "I don't understand. Protection." He said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Julia saw your face. She knows you warned me. She's not the forgiving type, and she has resources of her own. By tomorrow, she'll know your name, your address, where you work. She'll want revenge." Ice water flooded my veins. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you're in danger because you helped me. So now you're my responsibility." He stood, moving to a bar cart and pouring 2 glasses of what looked like whiskey. He handed me one, and I took it with numb fingers. "I'm offering you a choice. You can return to your apartment, your job, your life, and hope that Julia is too busy dealing with the fallout to bother with you. Or... He sat down again, closer this time, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Or you accept my protection. You move into a secured apartment. You receive a monthly stipend. You continue your life, but under my safeguard. In exchange, you'll be available when I need you." "Available for what?" My voice came out as a whisper. His smile was slow, dangerous. "I have many enemies, Miss Chen. Some of them would love to know I have a weakness. You'll appear on my arm at certain events. You'll play the role of my companion when necessary. You'll be seen, photographed, speculated about. And in doing so, you'll draw out the people who wish me harm. You want to use me as bait. I want to keep you alive while eliminating threats to both of us. He took a sip of his whiskey, his eyes never leaving mine, and before you ask, this is not negotiable. You're either under my protection or you're a liability. I don't tolerate liabilities. The threat hung in the air between us, unspoken, but clear. I looked at the amber liquid in my glass, at the view of the city from his penthouse, at the man who held my life in his hands with the casualness of someone adjusting a chess piece. When would I move? I heard myself ask. His expression shifted, satisfaction mixed with something darker. Tonight. The apartment he'd arranged was nothing like my studio. Located in a building 3 blocks from his penthouse, it occupied the entire 8th floor, a sprawling 2-bedroom with hardwood floors, crown molding, and windows that actually opened to let in fresh air. The kitchen had granite countertops and appliances I didn't know how to use. The bathroom had heated floors, and a shower big enough for 3 people. The master bedroom held a king-sized bed, with sheets that felt like silk against my skin. It felt like a gilded cage. 2 men had arrived at my old apartment within an hour of my agreement, efficiently packing my meager possessions while I stood in shock. They'd moved me in before midnight, then stationed themselves outside my new door. Guards, DeLuca had explained, for my protection. But I knew what they really were, wardens ensuring I didn't run. That first night, I lay in the enormous bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling like I'd sold my soul. Maybe I had. I'd traded my freedom for safety, my anonymity for protection. And somewhere in this city, a woman in a red dress was plotting revenge. The next morning, I found an envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a credit card, black, heavy, with my name embossed in silver, and a note in that same bold handwriting. For necessities. First event is Friday. Dress appropriately. D Friday. That gave me 3 days. I spent Tuesday in a daze, exploring my new prison. The refrigerator had been stocked with fresh food, real vegetables, imported cheeses, bread from a bakery instead of the corner store. The closet held hangers waiting for clothes I didn't own. Everything was perfect, sterile, ready for me to fill it with a life I didn't recognize. Wednesday, a woman arrived at my door. Tall, elegant, probably in her 50s, with silver hair and a perfect chignon, and eyes that assessed me like I was a project. Sophia Chen. I'm Margot. Mr. DeLuca has retained my services to prepare you for Friday's gala. Prepare me? I repeated stupidly. Her smile was professional but not unkind. Hair, makeup, wardrobe. You're attending the Castellano Foundation charity ball. It's quite the event. Mr. DeLuca wishes you to make an impression. She swept into my apartment with the authority of someone used to being obeyed, pulling out a tablet and scrolling through images. First, we need to address your wardrobe. The car is waiting downstairs. We have appointments at 3 boutiques, then hair and nail consultations. Shall we? I followed her like a puppet, still processing. The black credit card felt heavy in my purse as she ushered me into another Mercedes. Apparently, the DeLuca fleet was endless. And we drove to a part of the city where stores didn't have price tags because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. The first boutique was all white marble and soft lighting, with a single dress displayed like art on the wall. The owner greeted Margot by name, then turned assessing eyes on me. Ah, yes, I see it. Innocent but striking. Classic with an edge. I have just the thing. What followed was a blur of silk and satin, of being measured and pinned, of dresses that cost more than I used to make in 6 months. Margot rejected most with a simple shake of her head, until they brought out a gown in deep emerald green. Try this one, she instructed. In the dressing room, I slipped into the dress and barely recognized my reflection. It was elegant, but sensual, with a high neckline in front but cut to expose my entire back. The silk hugged my curves I didn't know I had, and pooled at my feet like liquid. It made me look sophisticated, dangerous even. Perfect, Margot declared when I emerged. We'll take it, and shoes to match, please. The price, I started, is irrelevant. She waved her hand dismissively. Mr. DeLuca's instructions were clear. Whatever is necessary. By Thursday evening, I'd been transformed. My hair had been cut and styled into soft waves that framed my face. My nails were painted a deep burgundy. Margot had taught me how to walk in 4-inch heels without looking like a newborn giraffe. She'd coached me on posture, on which fork to use, on how to smile without showing too much emotion. Remember, she said as she packed up her materials, you're not his girlfriend. You're not his lover. You're his companion. Professional, poised, mysterious. Let them speculate. Never confirm or deny anything. And above all, stay close to him. Don't wander. Don't accept drinks from anyone else. Don't trust anyone. The warning in her voice sent chills down my spine. Is it really that dangerous? Her expression softened slightly. Sophia, these events are theaters of war. The weapons are just better hidden. Mr. DeLuca has many enemies, and they'll all be watching to see who this new girl is. Show weakness, and they'll exploit it. Show too much strength, and they'll see you as a threat. She touched my shoulder gently. Stay close to him. He won't let anything happen to you, but would he? Or was I just another piece on his chessboard, expendable when necessary? Friday arrived too quickly. I spent the day in a state of anxious preparation, trying on the dress 3 times, practicing my walk, rehearsing responses to imaginary questions. At 6 p.m., there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find Dante DeLuca in a tuxedo that probably cost more than a small car. He looked devastating, all sharp lines and barely contained power. His dark hair swept back, his jaw freshly shaved. The white shirt made his olive skin seem to glow, and his eyes... God, those eyes swept over me with an intensity that made my skin burn. You look... He paused, and something flickered in his expression. Perfect. Margot did all the work, I said, suddenly self-conscious under his gaze. No. He stepped closer, and I caught his scent. That same cedar and bergamot that had haunted my dreams. Margot enhanced what was already there. You've been hiding, Sophia, trying to be invisible, but tonight everyone will see you. He offered his arm, and I took it, feeling the solid muscle beneath the expensive fabric. His guard, the same one from the restaurant, waited by the elevator, scanning the hallway before nodding. Marco will be nearby all evening, Dante explained as we descended. If we're separated for any reason, find him. Don't go anywhere with anyone else. Understand? I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. The ballroom was in a historic hotel that dripped with old money and older secrets. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across marble floors. Women in designer gowns glittered with jewelry that could feed families for years. Men in tuxedos clustered in groups, their laughter sharp and calculated. Waiters circulated with champagne and canapes that were tiny works of art. And everyone stopped talking when we entered. I felt their eyes like physical touches, assessing, calculating, speculating. Who was I? Where had I come from? What was I to Dante DeLuca? Whispers followed in our wake as he guided me through the crowd, his hand at the small of my back. Possessive, protective. Don't look nervous, he murmured against my ear, his breath warm on my skin. You belong here as much as any of them. But I didn't. I was a waitress in a designer gown, a fraud surrounded by real power. Every step felt precarious, like I might shatter the illusion with a wrong word or gesture. Dante. A man approached, silver-haired and distinguished, with a woman on his arm who looked like she'd been carved from ice. We didn't expect to see you tonight, and with such lovely company. Senator Morrison. Dante's voice was smooth as silk, revealing nothing. May I introduce Sophia Chen? Sophia, Senator Morrison and his wife, Catherine. I smiled the way Margot had taught me, polite but distant, and shook their hands. The senator's grip was firm, assessing. His wife's was cold, her smile not reaching her eyes. Chen, she repeated, her tone suggesting she was already calculating my net worth and finding it lacking. Are you in business, dear? I'm in transition, I said, using the phrase Margot had coached me on. Vague enough to mean anything, confident enough to discourage follow-up. How mysterious. The senator's eyes gleamed with curiosity. Dante does love his secrets. Some things are worth keeping private, Dante replied smoothly, his hand tightening almost imperceptibly at my waist. If you'll excuse us, I see someone we need to greet. He guided me away, and I felt like I'd just passed some kind of test. You did well, he said quietly. I didn't do anything. Exactly. You didn't crack under pressure. You didn't overshare. You maintained the mystique. He accepted 2 glasses of champagne from a passing waiter, handing me one. That's more than most people manage their first time in this arena. I took a sip. The bubbles sharp on my tongue. How long do we have to stay? Until I've accomplished what I came here for. His gaze swept the room, cataloging faces, tracking movements. There are 3 men here tonight who were at the restaurant. They were Julia's backup plan. If the initial hit failed, they were supposed to finish the job outside. I need to know who hired them. Ice flooded my veins. They're here? Now? They're always here. These events are where deals are made, where allegiances shift, where fortunes are won and lost. He set his champagne down, untouched. And where I remind everyone why it's unwise to cross the DeLuca family. Before I could ask what he meant, a commotion erupted near the entrance. The crowd parted like a curtain, and my blood turned to ice. Julia DeLuca stood in the doorway in a gown of blood red, her honey blonde hair cascading over her shoulders, diamonds glittering at her throat and wrists. She was even more beautiful than I remembered, and infinitely more terrifying. Her eyes swept the room until they found us, and her smile was pure venom. She began walking toward us, and the crowd held its collective breath. Dante, she purred, her accent thicker than his, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. How wonderful to see you, and with a date. How unexpected. She stopped directly in front of me, her gaze raking over me with barely concealed contempt. And who is this little mouse? Dante's hand at my waist tightened, almost bruising. Julia. I wasn't aware you'd received an invitation. Oh, darling, I'm always invited. These are my people too, remember? We built this empire together. Her smile was savage. Before you decided to throw it all away for cheap sentiment and cheaper companions. The insult hit like a slap, but I forced myself to hold her gaze, to channel every ounce of Margot's training. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. DeLuca. Her eyes flashed with rage at the formal address, at my refusal to cower. Is it? She leaned closer, her perfume cloying and sweet. Tell me, little mouse, has he told you how this ends? Has he explained what happens to his toys when he's finished playing? That's enough. Dante's voice cut through the tension like a blade. But Julia wasn't finished. She reached out, her manicured nails catching the light as she touched my cheek almost tenderly. He'll destroy you, she whispered, loud enough for only us to hear, just like he destroyed me. Just like he destroys everything he touches. And when he's done, you'll wish you'd never written that note. She knew. Of course she knew. And now everyone in this room would know that I was the one who'd warned him, the one who'd ruined her plan. I was a target, marked for death by a woman who had the resources and the rage to make it happen. The ballroom erupted into carefully controlled chaos the moment Julia stepped back. Conversations resumed at double volume. Laughter too loud. Everyone pretending they hadn't just witnessed a declaration of war, but I could feel their eyes on us. Hungry for blood. Eager to see how this drama would unfold. Dante's hand slid from my waist to intertwine with my fingers, his grip firm enough to keep me anchored. "Smile," he murmured, his voice low and commanding. "Don't let her see fear." I forced my lips into something resembling a smile, though my heart was hammering so hard I thought everyone could hear it. Julia had moved away, surrounded by a cluster of well-dressed vultures who were undoubtedly feeding on every detail. She laughed at something one of them said, the sound carrying across the room like breaking glass, but her eyes never left us. "We need to leave," I whispered urgently. She's not going to do anything here." Too many witnesses, too many cameras. Dante guided me toward the dance floor as a string quartet began playing. "But she's made her move, which means I need to make mine. Dance with me. I don't know how to—" But he was already pulling me into his arms, one hand at my waist, the other holding mine as he swept me into a waltz. I stumbled, my heels catching on the hem of my dress, but his grip was iron, holding me upright, guiding me through steps I didn't know. "Follow my lead," he said, his mouth close to my ear. "Don't think. Just feel." It was impossible not to feel, his body pressed against mine, the heat of his hand burning through the silk at my back, the solid strength of him surrounding me. Up close, I could see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the shadow of exhaustion he hid behind control. He smelled like expensive cologne in danger, and despite everything, despite the terror and the threat and the insanity of this situation, I felt safe in his arms. "The man at 3 o'clock, he murmured as he spun me. "Gray suit, silver tie. That's Vincent Calabrese. He was at the restaurant. Watch his hands." I risked a glance and saw a man in his 50s, distinguished looking, with cold eyes that tracked our movement. His right hand kept moving to his jacket pocket, a nervous tell. "He's armed," I breathed. "Everyone here is armed, Kara. The difference is who's willing to use their weapon." Dante spun me again, positioning us so his back was to Calabrese. "And who's watching?" I understood then. This wasn't just a dance, it was a message. By holding me close, by displaying me in front of everyone, Dante was declaring that I was under his protection, that anyone who touched me would answer to him. It was possessive and archaic and should have terrified me. Instead, I felt a dangerous thrill. The song ended, and polite applause rippled through the crowd. Dante didn't release me immediately. His hand lingered at my waist, his thumb tracing a small circle against my spine that sent heat flooding through me. "Mr. DeLuca." A new voice cut through the moment. Deep, accented, carrying an edge of threat barely concealed beneath civility. We turned to find a man approaching, flanked by 2 others who moved with military precision. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of face that had been handsome before violence had carved it into something harder. His tuxedo was impeccable, but underneath, I sensed barely controlled violence. Dante's entire body tensed. "Constantine, I heard rumors you'd found new companionship." The man, Constantine, swept his gaze over me with an assessment that made my skin crawl. "She's quite lovely. Very different from Julia. That's the point," Dante replied coolly. Constantine laughed, a sound without humor. "Always the businessman. Tell me, does she know what she's gotten herself into? Does she understand the price of being seen with you? That's not your concern, isn't it?" Constantine stepped closer, and I felt Marco materialize at my other side, his presence a wall of muscle. "You made it my concern when you refused my offer, when you chose to protect your territory instead of expanding into mine. Now you parade this girl around like a trophy, marking her as yours, making her a target for anyone who wants to hurt you. The threat was explicit now, hanging in the air between them. I wanted to run, to disappear, but Dante's hand at my waist held me in place. "If you're threatening what's mine," Dante said softly, and there was death in that softness, "then we have nothing more to discuss. Not a threat. An observation." Constantine's smile was razor sharp. "Beautiful things break so easily, don't they? It would be a shame if something happened to her. An accident, perhaps. Wrong place. Wrong time. These things happen in our world." Marco's hand moved toward his jacket, but Dante's voice stopped him. "Constantine, walk away. Now, before this becomes something neither of us can walk back from." For a long moment, the two men stared at each other, and I felt the weight of decades of rivalry, of territories and power plays I couldn't begin to understand. Finally, Constantine stepped back, his smile never wavering. "Enjoy the evening, Dante. And you, Miss Chen," I managed, proud that my voice didn't shake. "Miss Chen, I do hope we meet again, under better circumstances." He inclined his head, then turned and melted back into the crowd with his guards. I realized I'd been holding my breath. Who was that? The head of the Volkov family, Russian Mafia. Dante's jaw was tight with controlled fury. They've been trying to push into Italian territory for years. Seeing me with you, seeing that I have something to protect, they'll see it as weakness. Then why bring me here at all? The words burst out before I could stop them. Why make me a target? He turned to me, and the intensity in his eyes stole my breath. Because you were already a target the moment you handed me that note, because hiding you away would only delay the inevitable. And because... He paused, something shifting in his expression. Because now everyone knows that hurting you means war with me. And no one wants that war, except Julia, I whispered. And Constantine. And how many others? Too many to count. His thumb traced my cheekbone, the gesture almost tender. "Which is why you don't leave my sight, not tonight. Not until this is finished." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of introductions and veiled threats, of smiles that didn't reach eyes and handshakes that felt like tests. Dante kept me close, his hand always at my waist or holding mine, his presence a constant shield. I met senators and CEOs, socialites and criminals disguised in designer suits. All of them assessed me, calculated my worth, and found me wanting in different ways. By the time we finally left, near midnight, my feet were screaming in their heels, and my face hurt from maintaining a pleasant expression. The Mercedes was waiting at the curb, Marco already scanning the street, before allowing us to approach. Inside the car, Dante finally relaxed slightly, his shoulders dropping as privacy screens went up. "You survived your first gala." "Barely." I slipped off my heels with a groan of relief. "Is it always like that?" "Usually worse. Tonight was relatively civilized." I laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. "If that was civilized, I don't want to see uncivilized." He smiled. A real smile this time, not the calculated masks he'd worn all evening. It transformed his face, made him look younger, almost approachable. Almost. "You did well, Sophia. Better than I expected. Most people crack under that kind of pressure." "I'm used to pressure. It just usually involves balancing trays and dealing with angry customers, not dancing with mafia bosses while their enemies circle like sharks." The car pulled up to my building, and reality crashed back. I lived here now, under his protection, under his control. This was my life for the foreseeable future. Fancy apartments and dangerous parties and being a target for anyone who wanted to hurt him. "Thank you," I said quietly. "For tonight. For..." I gestured vaguely, unable to articulate everything I meant. He studied me in the dim light of the car, his expression unreadable. "This isn't over, Sophia. Tonight was just the opening move." Julia and Constantine both made their intentions clear. It's going to get worse before it gets better. How much worse? Instead of answering, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. My heart stopped. "This isn't what you think," he said, opening it to reveal a delicate gold chain with a pendant. A small medallion engraved with the DeLuca crest. "In my family, this represents protection. Anyone who sees it knows you're under my personal safeguard. It won't stop everyone, but it will make most people think twice." He gestured for me to turn around, and with trembling hands, I swept my hair aside. His fingers brushed my neck as he fastened the chain, the touch sending electricity down my spine. The medallion settled in the hollow of my throat, cool against my skin. "Don't take it off," he said. Not for any reason. I turned back to face him, my hand moving unconsciously to touch the pendant. "Dante, I need to ask you something." "Ask." "Why me? You could have any woman you wanted. Professional bodyguards, trained operatives. Why a broke waitress who can barely take care of herself?" He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw in a way I hadn't heard before. "Because when you handed me that note, you didn't think about the consequences. You didn't calculate the risk versus reward. You saw someone in danger and you acted, even though it could have cost you everything." His hand came up, cupping my face with surprising gentleness. In my world, that kind of genuine courage is rarer than diamonds, and infinitely more valuable. His thumb brushed my lower lip, and heat pooled low in my stomach. For one breathless moment I thought he might kiss me. Wanted him to, despite everything. Despite the danger and the manipulation and the impossibility of it all. But he pulled back, his expression closing off again. "Marco will walk you up. Sleep well, Sophia. Tomorrow, the real work begins." I wanted to ask what that meant, but Marco was already opening my door, extending his hand to help me out. I climbed from the car on shaking legs, the emerald dress suddenly feeling too heavy, the medallion at my throat both a comfort and a collar. I watched the Mercedes pull away, taking Dante back to his penthouse, his empire, his world of violence and power. And I stood on the sidewalk in a dress that cost more than my rent, wearing jewelry that marked me as his, and wondered at what point I'd stopped being a victim of circumstance and started being a willing participant in my own destruction. The answer terrified me, the moment he'd touched my face and called my courage valuable. Because I'd felt something in that touch, something dangerous and consuming and utterly impossible to ignore. And I knew, with sickening certainty, that I was falling for a man who could destroy me more thoroughly than any enemy ever could. The next 3 weeks blurred together in a haze of controlled chaos and dangerous proximity. True to his word, Dante put me to work. Not as bait, exactly, but as his shadow. Present at dinners with business associates, silent during meetings in restaurants where money changed hands under tables, visible at gallery openings and charity events where he needed to be seen. I became a fixture at his side, the mysterious woman whose presence raised questions nobody dared ask directly, and with each appearance, the danger escalated. First, it was small things. A threatening note slipped under my door, a dead rat left on my doorstep. My car, which Dante had replaced with a sleek black Audi I was terrified to drive, keyed in the parking garage. Marco increased security, adding a second guard to shadow my movements. But the message was clear. Someone wanted me afraid. Then it got worse. I was leaving a cafe near my apartment, coffee in hand, when a black SUV jumped the curb. I barely had time to scream before Marco yanked me backward, the vehicle missing me by inches before speeding away. My coffee splattered across the sidewalk like blood, and my hands shook so badly Marco had to guide me back to the building. Dante arrived within minutes, his face a mask of cold fury. He didn't ask if I was okay. He could see I wasn't. Instead, He pulled me against his chest, one hand in my hair, holding me while I trembled. "I'm moving you," he said into my hair. "Tonight. To the penthouse." "No." I pulled back, surprising both of us. "That's what they want. They want to isolate me, to make me completely dependent on you. I won't—" "You almost died, Sophia." His voice was raw. "They escalated from threats to action. Next time, Marco might not be fast enough." "Then teach me to protect myself." The words came out stronger than I felt. "Give me a gun. Teach me to shoot, to fight back. I won't be helpless. I can't." He studied me for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. "You're not what I expected. Neither are you." That night, he took me to a private shooting range in the basement of one of his buildings. For 2 hours, he stood behind me, his hands guiding mine, teaching me how to hold a weapon, how to breathe, how to squeeze the trigger instead of pulling. His body pressed against mine, his voice low in my ear, and I couldn't tell if the heat flooding through me was fear or something far more dangerous. "Again!" he commanded after I'd emptied the clip into the target, my shots wild and scattered. "Focus on the center mass. Don't aim for the head. Too small a target. Aim for what you can't miss." I reloaded with shaking hands, raised the gun, and fired. This time, 3 shots hit the silhouette's chest, not center mass, but closer. Better. His hand covered mine on the gun, steadying it. "You have good instincts, Kara. You just need to trust them." That became our routine, days of playing his companion in public, nights of training in private. He taught me to shoot, to fight dirty, to spot threats before they materialized. And somewhere in those late-night sessions, with sweat on my skin and his hands on my body correcting my stance, the line between protection and possession began to blur. I told myself I was still afraid of him, that the way my pulse raced when he touched me was fear, not desire, that the heat in his eyes when he looked at me was calculation, not hunger. I was lying to myself. 2 weeks after the SUV incident, everything came to a head. Dante received intelligence that Julia was planning something big, a final move to eliminate both of us. She'd allied with Constantine, combining Italian and Russian resources for a coordinated attack. The target, a private art auction at a warehouse Dante owned, where he was scheduled to acquire a painting worth millions. "It's a trap," Marco warned during the briefing in Dante's office. I sat in the corner, officially just listening, but Dante kept glancing at me like he needed to confirm I was still there. "She knows you'll go. She's counting on it. Then we spring the trap first." Dante's voice was cold, clinical. "We go, we bring extra security, and we end this tonight." "And Sophia?" Marco's eyes flicked to me. "She's a target too. She stays here, locked down. 6 guards on the penthouse." "No." I stood, my heart hammering. If I'm here alone, I'm vulnerable. At least at the auction, I'm with you. "Absolutely not. You said I was valuable because I act without calculating risk." I moved closer to his desk, planting my hands on the polished wood. "You said my courage was worth protecting. So let me be courageous. Let me stand with you instead of hiding like a coward." His jaw tightened, a muscle ticking. "If something happens to you, then you deal with it the way you deal with everything else. But you don't lock me away like I'm breakable." I held his gaze, refusing to back down. "I'm going, with or without your permission." Marco made a choking sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. Dante's eyes flashed with something between fury and admiration. "You're the most infuriating woman I've ever met." "I'll take that as a compliment." It wasn't meant as one, but his mouth curved slightly. "Fine. You come, but you stay with Marco at all times. You don't leave his side, you don't wander, and if I tell you to run, you run. Understood?" "Understood." The warehouse was in an industrial district near the docks, all exposed brick and steel beams, transformed for the night into an elegant gallery space. Paintings hung on temporary walls, soft lighting making the art glow. Waiters circulated with champagne. A string quartet played softly in the corner. And beneath the civilized veneer, I felt the tension crackling like electricity. Dante's security was everywhere. Men in dark suits positioned at every entrance, on every catwalk, their eyes constantly scanning. Marco kept me close, his hand hovering near his weapon. Dante worked the room with practiced ease, greeting collectors and dealers, but I could see the coiled readiness in his posture. He was waiting for it. We all were. It started with the lights. They cut out suddenly, plunging the warehouse into darkness. Screams erupted. Glass shattered. And then gunfire. Sharp cracks that echoed off the brick walls like thunder. Marco shoved me down behind a display wall, his body covering mine. "Stay down!" More gunshots. Shouting in Italian and Russian, the chaos of violence erupting in darkness. I pressed myself against the wall, my hand moving to the small gun Dante had given me. A Glock 43, light enough for my hands, deadly enough to stop a threat. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in eerie red. Through the gaps in the display wall, I saw figures moving, Dante's men and others, enemies, exchanging fire. Bodies on the ground, blood spreading across polished concrete. "Marco!" Dante's voice cut through the chaos. "Get her out! North exit!" Marco grabbed my arm, hauling me up, half carrying me toward the back of the warehouse. We'd made it maybe 20 feet when a figure stepped into our path. Julia. She'd traded her designer gowns for tactical black, her hair pulled back, a gun in her hands that she pointed directly at my chest. Even in the red emergency lighting, her beauty was terrible. A vengeful angel come to deliver death. "Hello, little mouse," she said, her accent thick with rage. "Did you really think you could take what's mine and live?" Marco reached for his weapon, but another figure emerged behind us. One of Constantine's men. Gun pressed to Marco's head. We were trapped. "Julia?" Dante's voice came from somewhere in the shadows. "Let her go. Your fight is with me." "No." Julia's eyes never left mine. "My fight is with everyone who helped you betray me. Starting with the waitress who ruined everything." Her finger tightened on the trigger, and time seemed to slow. I saw the hammer pulling back, saw the inevitability of my death in her eyes. My hand moved without thought, pulling my own gun. Years of Dante's training compressed into muscle memory. 2 shots rang out simultaneously. I felt something tear through my shoulder, spinning me backward. Pain exploded through my body, white-hot and consuming. But I saw Julia stagger, saw red bloom across her chest, saw the shock in her eyes as she looked down at the wound. I'd shot her. I'd actually shot her. Everything erupted into chaos. Dante appeared like an avenging angel, his gun aimed at Constantine's man. Marco twisted free, disarming his captor. More of Dante's security poured in. The Russian tried to run, but didn't make it 3 steps before Dante's bullet found him. Then Dante was at my side, gathering me into his arms, his hands pressing against my shoulder. "Sophia. Sophia, stay with me." "I shot her," I whispered, shock setting in. You survived. That's all that matters." His voice was fierce, desperate in a way I'd never heard. "Marco, get the car. Now!" The warehouse was in chaos. Sirens in the distance, Dante's men securing the scene, Constantine's forces retreating. And in the center of it all, Julia lay still, her eyes staring at nothing, blood pooling beneath her. I'd killed her. The thought kept circling as Dante carried me to the car, as Marco drove through red lights toward a private hospital, as doctors with no questions asked worked on my shoulder. I'd taken a life. I'd looked another human being in the eyes and pulled the trigger. and I'd do it again to survive. The bullet had gone clean through, missing bone and major arteries. Lucky, the doctor said. I'd be fine in a few weeks. But lying in the hospital bed, Dante in the chair beside me refusing to leave, I didn't feel fine. I felt transformed, changed into something I barely recognized. It gets easier, Dante said quietly, reading my thoughts. The first one is always the hardest. Does it get easier? He was quiet for a long time. No, it gets familiar. That's different. I turned to look at him. This man who'd upended my life, who'd turned me from invisible waitress into someone capable of killing. His face was drawn with exhaustion, his shirt still stained with my blood, and his eyes held something I'd never seen there before. Fear. For me. Why didn't you let me die? I asked. Back at the restaurant? Back at the auction? I'm just a waitress. I'm nobody. You're not nobody. He leaned forward, his hand finding mine. You're the woman who saved my life without thinking twice, who faced down senators and mobsters without flinching, who learned to shoot in 2 weeks and took down my ex-wife to survive. His grip tightened. You're the bravest person I've ever met. And somewhere along the way you stopped being an obligation and became something I can't afford to lose. My breath caught. Dante. I know. I know it's insane. I know I've ruined your life, pulled you into a world you never asked for. But Christo, Sophia, you make me want to be the man you see when you look at me instead of the monster everyone else sees. He kissed my knuckles, and the tenderness in that gesture broke something in me. When you're healed, he continued, you can leave. I'll give you money, a new identity, set you up anywhere in the world. You'll be free of all of this, of me. And if I don't want to leave? His head snapped up, hope and disbelief warring in his expression. Sophia, you said I had courage. Well, here it is. I pulled him closer with my good arm. I choose to stay, not because I'm trapped or afraid, but because somewhere in this madness, I fell for you. The real you, not the mask. And I want to see where that goes, even if it's dangerous, especially if it's dangerous. His kiss was everything I'd imagined and nothing I'd expected, fierce and gentle, claiming and questioning, tasting of coffee and desperation. When we finally broke apart, his forehead rested against mine, his breath ragged. You're going to drive me insane, he murmured. Good. You deserve it. He laughed, the sound genuine and unburdened, and I realized I'd never heard him laugh like that before, like he was free. The next weeks were recovery and reconstruction. Constantine, faced with the death of Julia and the failure of his attack, retreated to Russian territory, his alliance dissolved, the families brokered an uneasy peace. Dante consolidated power, and I healed. When I was finally released from the doctor's care, Dante took me to his penthouse, not as a prisoner or an obligation, but as a partner. We stood at the windows overlooking the city, his arms around me, the medallion still at my throat. What happens now? I asked. Now? He turned me in his arms, his eyes holding that warmth I'd learned to recognize as love, even if he hadn't said the word yet. Now we build something new, something that's ours. No more pretending, no more games. Just us, figuring this out together. I'm still a waitress at heart, I warned. I don't know how to be a Mafia queen. Good. I don't need a Mafia queen. I need you. Stubborn, courageous, infuriating you. He kissed me softly. The woman who handed me a note and changed everything. 6 months later, I stood in Russo's, now under new ownership, legitimate business, no more shadowy dealings. Dante had bought it and given it to Antonio to run properly. I wasn't waitressing anymore. Instead, I managed Dante's legitimate business operations, using my skills to transform his empire from something built on fear to something built on respect. It wasn't perfect. There were still threats, still danger, still nights when I woke from nightmares of Julia's dying eyes, but there was also Dante's warmth beside me, his steady presence, his gradual transformation from ruthless boss to a man learning to trust, to love, to build instead of destroy. We were eating dinner at our usual table, the corner booth, back to the wall, when he slid a small box across the table. Not velvet this time, simple wood, carved with the DeLuca crest. "Before you panic," he said, amusement in his eyes. "It's not what you think. Open it." Inside was a key, just a simple brass key on a chain. "What's this?" "Key to the penthouse. Your penthouse too, if you want it." He took my hand. "I know we've done everything backward. Started with danger, moved to survival, and somehow ended up here. But I'm asking you now properly. Sophia Chen, will you build a life with me, not as my companion or my obligation, but as my partner, my equal, my future?" Tears burned my eyes as I took the key, as I leaned across the table to kiss him in the restaurant where it all began. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Around us, the restaurant continued its evening service. Waiters moved between tables. Customers laughed and ate and lived their normal lives, unaware that the couple in the corner booth had fought through hell to find this moment of peace. I was no longer invisible, no longer just surviving. I'd been tested by fire and emerged transformed, stronger, fiercer, loved by a dangerous man who'd learned to be gentle with me. The medallion at my throat wasn't a collar anymore. It was a promise. And as Dante's hand covered mine, the key between our palms, I knew that I'd made the right choice that night at Russo's. Not the safe choice, not the easy one, but mine. And sometimes, even when it leads straight into the fire,